for rendering, you can use a basic blend material, which is fine, or you can use something like the, let's go in here. There's bump viewer material, which is, again, very similar in a way. It's sort of showing off, right, all the little kind of like highlights. There's a specular highlight, so we're kind of seeing a good amount of the mesh detail and scan detail. Now, like I said, I would typically take this further and do, like I said, the subtle wrinkles and pores and things like that, but in this case, we're kind of doing this for the demo. So usually what I'll do is I'll hit F to frame. What I will also have to do as well, I do want full HD turntable, so I'm going to go to Document. And when you hit New Document, which I typically do, it auto fits the window size. So whatever resolution of screen you have, it kind of creates a pixel dimension of whatever this workspace is available based on your interface. So we do want to set this to 1920 by 1080 and hit Resize. And it's going to kind of show me a stretch version of what was left on the canvas. So I'm going to hit Control-N, drag out my model again, hit T to enter edit mode. And then I'm going to go back to Document and use the Zoom tool to zoom out so I can sort of see that full document frame. Because I don't want the document cropped off from my view because I want to see my framing. Hit F to frame my model. I also will tend to zoom or pull back a little bit on the resolution. Yeah, like I said, typically the bottom of the base here is kind of bugging me, so I probably would let's say go to free subdivisions, and I'll switch this back to a basic material here. So I'll see if I can try to kind of get a loop if I can. The other thing, of course, is I can literally just remesh this one more time, so I can let's see, in symmetry, maybe mask this a bit. Yeah, let's go to mask lasso. Okay, so I'll take something like that. I'll hit Control W, and then I can just zero mesh this. I'll say keep groups and keep the poly count the same. That's fine. Okay, I'm going to delete that hidden poly group at this stage. Oops, sorry, give me that 1 second. Sorry, to freeze again and delete that poly group. So that just allows me to have a cleaner kind of base, right, for the sculpt. Okay. So I'm still in my HD document, my full HD document here, 1920 by 1080. I will hit F to frame, and then I will tend to zoom out just a little bit, just so I don't kind of accidentally cut off the model in any sort of turntable. Also, by the way, if you go into, what's it called, under light, there is sort of a key light. So if you move this to the side, I'm going to just dock this to my left side here so you can see that. So the initial light here is actually like a key light, and if you move it around, we can see it update. If you're using a matte cap, by the way, this will not update live. A matte cap is almost like a pre-captured material with some lighting and reflection information built in. So you have to actually hit BPR to see the lighting kind of hit the surface there. So I do prefer, even when I'm just doing basic lighting setup, so again, I could use either blend. I think in this case I'll prefer to use the bump viewer material. So let's go back there. It's a little more contrasty. The other thing is I might drop the intensity of this light a little bit to maybe 60–70%, just so I get a nice contrast. The other thing is if you click on the light next to this, there's a kind of a gray bulb. If you click on that, you can add a fill light, a secondary light. So usually I'll put that kind of off and to the right, and you can again adjust the intensity. So I'm going to just make sure my key light is kind of up high, 60%. Fill light on the right side at about 30, which is fine. That's default. And I'll just play a bit with the positioning of the light. Again, if you hit BPR, that is your kind of best preview render. Now, I typically do not like the strength of the shadows in these renders, so I will go into Render, and then under Render Settings or Render Properties, there's, sorry, I'll go to BPR Shadow. Usually I'll turn the strength down to like 30, 40, 50%. I'll try 40. And I'll increase my blur. This will increase the render time quite a bit though, so I'll just increase it to 12. So it's going to give me kind of nice, softer shadows that are less contrasty, right? So I still get some shading, but it's less harsh, less severe. Additionally, what I do like to do with the shadows as well, I'm going to actually drop the resolution. I can try like 512. Now, usually what I would do is actually increase the, for quality, I would actually go into the blur and crank this up to 50, but that just really grinds your render time down. Whereas if you actually drop the resolution, by blurring and dropping resolution, you get faster renders, but a much, much nicer, softer shadow. So if I hit render again, we'll see, again, it should give me a bit of a softer shadow there. Oops, sorry, that was 512 I wanted. There, so you get this kind of nice soft shadow compared to just the default render. Plus you're also getting sort of sharper resolution on the render itself. And again, it's still pretty quick per frame. One last thing, if we go into the material setting, so I'm going to just close the light panel here and go to material and dock that. There's something called wax modifiers, and if we turn up the strength, it'll actually give you a warning. Hey, you have to turn on the preview. Right now I'm not seeing anything happen, but if I go back over to render, under render properties, I can turn on wax preview. So what this will do, if I turn up the strength, and you can see this up close maybe, oops, it's actually almost creating like a faux subsurface scatter, okay? So if I turn it up, you'll see it almost kind of go like pinkish. So again, if I turn it up on this material, oh, maybe it won't show on flat, but let's go back to blend. If I crank it all the way, you see it kind of adds this almost like soft, almost like fake subsurface scatter. So I really like that on something organic looking, is a little bit of that wax modifier. So let me go back to, what is it, the bump viewer. 60, I think it's a bit too much at 80, so I'll dial it back to maybe 60 or 70. And then I'll hit BPR. And I think we got a pretty decent render. So if you want BPR to render in your turntables, as soon as I left click and drag and rotate, it kind of breaks out of the BPR render. But if I, again, recenter it, have it face the camera here, and hit BPR, now when I go to do a turntable, if I go to movie, by the way, these settings I apply to virtually all my turntables. I want to record not the window, which is everything including the interface. I don't want the interface. So I'm going to go to document, which is just the document window. I want it to be 100% of the resolution. Under modifiers, mainly because ZBrush has a weird issue with exporting 24 frames a second. It just converts everything to 30 for some reason. I'm not sure why, but I'll set my recording and my playback to 30 frames per second. As well, I don't want the cursor visible at all, so I always set this to 0. And if you want to do a 10-second turntable, which I typically do, I do 300 frames. A few other weird things too. There's a title image, which is literally almost like a full page, a full document size, like fade in and fade out of the logo. I find it very distracting, so I set that to 0 for fade in, fade out. And again, there's a ZBrush logo that shows up in the bottom right. You can always replace this with your name, your own logo, text, whatever. But in this case, I'm just going to leave it at 0. That's fine. You can also do this in Premiere as well if you wanted to do that. So those are usually the settings that I want to changing. Again, I haven't snapped out of the BPR view, so if I hit turntable right now, you'll see it's going to actually do right, the kind of rendering with samples. It is a bit slower than a standard turntable, but it will look pretty good. Okay, so you can preview your movie. Usually what I'll do when I export, I've had to kind of cut it short for the demo, but you want to hit H for high quality export. You can also hit play movie. Again, I've kind of canceled it halfway because it was taking a while, but once you're happy with that result, you go export, okay? And then I usually go and delete the movie, because you're going to create a second movie. So again, I'm going to shift rotate back to the front view here. And we're just simply going to turn on the scan only. Now for this one, I typically don't need the BPR and all that sort of stuff. I'm fine without it. So we can just simply go to movie. All the specs are the same, and you just hit turntable, and this will obviously go a fair bit faster, and we'll export our second movie. And I've got mine already rendered out, so I'll show that. Here's my raw rendered movies. There's the raw scan and the cleanup. And what's nice is that they're basically in the same position. They're rotating at the same rate. They're starting the same way. So what we can do with that is simply go to Premiere Pro. So I'm just going to create a new project. And just going to locate my files, I guess. So I'm just going to basically select the two turntables that I have from my folder here, and should be able to create a sequence. Okay, sorry, I'm just going to get my turntables in here. Okay, so my sequence, by the way, if you want to check your sequence, you can go to sequence settings. I always like to check to make sure the frame rate, that's 30 frames a second, that's great. It's full HD. I don't really need audio, and that's fine. But so right now I've got the two scans side by side. So what I'm going to do is basically just stack one on the other. I'll probably just take the remesh above and take this one below. And again, it's a nice 10-second turn. So what you can do is... yeah, I'm going to switch my window or my workspace to production. And I can just click and drag this production window over here, just so I get a bit more view of my preview window. Okay, so if I take this, I can kind of yeah, double click on my remesh turntable. We'll see it pop up over here. If I go to effects control under motion, I can slide its position horizontally over here. So usually, yeah, you kind of want to see its extreme, let's say, left turn, or turn to facing the left. So I can kind of push it over a bit more that way. Okay, and then if we go under, there's a little window here called Effects. So if I go to Video Effects, I think I just want to mask. So I'm going to type in mask. Or maybe crop, actually, I should say. Terminology is a little different here, so I'm going to just drag that onto that clip. And so what I can do is, again, I'll scrub over to where I'm facing the right. Now this is, again, you can see from this view, it's actually a bit too far over. So I'm going to go back up to motion, bump it back over just a bit to the right. Again, I really want to avoid clipping or cropping if I can. So yeah, I'll bump it a little more over there. So again, I think the furthest point is going to be sort of here, let's say. So if I go to crop, I can say crop right. And you can sort of see, right, it's yeah, maybe to about there. I think I will. You know what, I'm not too worried about the neck being cropped off that much. It's more the face I'm concerned with. So let's just take a look at that. I think that looks pretty good. And that's about roughly half the screen, right? So that side is taken care of. If I really wanted to, I could have maybe made the background bright green or something and done what's called color keying. And there is, if you type in key, there is something like color key, right? So pick that green and just pop it out, and then we could just put a flat gray background back in. But in this case, I'm okay with that result. So again, I'm going to double click on the raw scan turntable, and again go to effects control, and it has its own motion control. So I'm going to just simply push it over to the right side, And then again, I want to check the turn of both to make sure I'm not losing anything here. So that's simply how I would get the dual turntable to work, right? And I find these generally look quite nice. So I'll go to File, Export Media. And H.264 is fine. I don't need the audio. And I'm going to switch the location. I'm going to put it into my folder where my other source videos are, just so I can kind of keep things nice and compact. So I'll go to Scan Project, and I'll just call this Side by Side Save. And I think that's basically it. I don't need to worry about metadata or effects either. I don't think there's anything there that's, yeah. All right, so I can say export, and it's going to basically render out. So if I look at here, double click that window, I now have a nice side-by-side turntable, right?